Welcome back to another edition of Political Breakfast here on WABE. I'm Lisa Rayam, and with me today are our strategists, Brian Robinson and Tharon Johnson. Hello to both of you.
Hey.
Hey.
Hello. Happy Masters Week.
Yeah. We were just kind of chatting about that, but it's Masters Week, but the talk of the town is Tiger, right?
Yeah. He looked rough in those photos, man. And to this day, even though he's really never in contention these days at this point in his life, he is still, when he is on the course, a massive draw. You just see the hordes following him everywhere he goes. Just truly an icon who is magnetic. People just want to see him. And I know there's great disappointment that he won't be on the course this week, but I hope he can get some help and get better, because the folks who have those pain pill addictions just have such a hard time getting off of them. These things end poorly if you don't stop, and it will be such a great loss. He's a beloved.
What I'm being told is that he was trying to actually get in shape, back to golf shape, to possibly
Yeah.
it was a 50-50 chance to go to the Masters. But I think at that moment when he knew that he was impaired, when he knew that he was not feeling well, clearly, and then to have that happen is just so unfortunate. And this is not the first time. This is the third time he's had some type of crash or accident. But the good thing is that he's going to get help. He's checking himself in. He's going to get treatment. And that is so important. But I was at the Masters this week. I went for the practice round on Monday. And B-Rob is right. I mean, I accepted those tickets, and thank you so much for my host and sponsor, because I was hoping to see Tiger at least practice. It was definitely talk of the Masters. People feel sorry for him, but we're all praying for him to get some help and a speedy recovery.
Well, what are people talking about now that the Georgia legislative session is over? The people that I've talked to, they feel like it was a weird vibe to this session for some reason. A lot was presented, a lot got done like normally, but there was a different air about this session. I wanted to know what you two thought, because I know you made it down to the Gold Dome often.
Yeah, there really was. I think, and it ended with a lot of animosity between the House and Senate. But really, it breaks down into gangs even within those two bodies, and it's somewhat normal in a election year where we are electing all of our constitutional officers, where the House and Senate, as always, are on the line in the election. But in this particular case, you had a sitting lieutenant governor running for governor during a moment when an outside billionaire came in and really changed the dynamic and made the lieutenant governor change his calculations, that made them go out there and use their leverage, as almost any lieutenant governor would do in that scenario. I'm not casting stones, to use the power they have as lieutenant governor to keep folks from coming out in favor of your political opponents. And that certainly came to bear on certain pieces of legislation. People's bills were killed because they were seen as supporting other candidates in the race. And then in the Senate, you had Tillery, Dolezal, and Gooch. And of course, we had Senator Kennedy, who resigned right before the session. And so that led to a bunch of gamesmanship there in the Senate as well. So I don't know that it's really all that unusual what happened, but I do think it was a little worse than normal in an election year like this, where all of the offices are open and there's a lot of people competing for them. So very normal in that way. But yes, a lot of acrimony and a lot of things left unresolved at the end, and a lot of hard feelings. And I think you're beginning to see some of those hard feelings take shape this week, as you have House members coming out and endorsing people who aren't Burt Jones.
Wow. Tharon, what are your thoughts on that? Because, again, the chatter's been more about the mood of what was happening at the Gold Dome the last few days leading up to Sine Die.
Well, this was unprecedented, as B-Rob just talked about. So let's just start with the Senate. It was very clear in the last 3 weeks of the session, specifically after crossover day, that it was all about prioritization. The lieutenant governor was very emboldened. He was going to pass his bills, even if it was modified, watered down, changed, amended. He was going to make sure that the sales tax and other things was going to happen. And then you had everyone else who was running for higher office. B-Rob talked about people running for lieutenant governor, but we also had two members in the state Senate who were running for attorney general, Bill Cowser and Brian Strickland. Strickland had a bill or two that he wanted to get passed, and Cowser up into the wee hours of the night, the last day, I mean, was going to the well, still offering friendly amendments and really trying to position himself. So I think the Senate for me was very clear. B. Rob and others have reported that folks got threatened. If you were seen or even thought about supporting Rick Jackson, again, I don't have any way of proving this. I didn't see any text messages, but it was a chatter at the Capitol. But I do think that the lieutenant governor was very emboldened in making sure, particularly, that he got things done. And then with Blake Tillery, who was able to pass a budget in the wee hours of the night going into the last day. In the House, Lisa, Speaker Burns got his literacy bill passed. It's a great first step to dealing with our literacy problem in the state. This is something that is near and dear to his heart. But he also got his property tax relief bill passed, which was a extremely modified version. Now, you got to give kudos to the Speaker and everyone, because they did work very hard. I mean, it went back and forth like 4 or 5 times. Also, you had GMA, you had the school boards, you had local mayors, local city council members push back pretty aggressively, very concerned about how this was going to negatively impact their cities and their tax digest. But ultimately, the Republicans got it done. But what really things got weird, Lisa, is 2 things. One, we're not talking about this a lot, and I want to talk about in this podcast, HB 369. This was a bill that is on the governor's desk that was passed to target 5 counties in the metro area, particularly to take these races and make them, quote unquote, nonpartisan. Fulton, DeKalb, Clayton, Gwinnett, and Cobb. That changed the sort of tone. You saw Democrats come out right away. And then what really changed the feeling, Lisa, and this is probably what a lot of your folks are talking about, is Chairman Alan Powell, who had been sort of consistent the entire session, pushing his bills, went to the floor and tried to pass a bill to honor people through monuments. And Democrats erupted. And I want to talk about this on this podcast. And B-Rob saw this. The bill only failed by 1 vote. Leader Carolyn Hughley actually made a motion to table the vote, and it actually, that table motion only failed by 1 vote. And then when the actual vote came up, it only failed by 1 vote. So had it been 1 more Republican or 1 Democrat who didn't vote the right way or absent, we could have seen an eruption in this state. And so I want to applaud those Democrats who spoke out against this bill. The Republicans were pretty defiant that they were going to vote for this, but that is what changed the mood, Lisa, leading into Sine Die. I mean, we'd almost made it through the session without any sort of bad issues, wedge issues. But that's those two things are kind of what changed the mood.
That caused you to sit up, Brian. Yeah, when you heard that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. That was a weird debate. I was raising my eyebrows because there were some sound bites there that raised people's eyebrows in the debate over the monuments. But Tharon, did the bill to make the 5 counties local races nonpartisan pass, or did that die on the vine?
No, it's actually at the governor's desk.
Oh, it passed.
It
really?
passed.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a modified bill. It went through pretty quickly and quietly. But now what you see is Democrats and other groups are coming out saying to call the governor's office and encourage him to veto it.
Yeah. Well, let me give you my perspective on it. And this isn't a Republican or Democrat perspective. This is more of I live in North DeKalb, but I'm not a Democrat perspective. I don't get a say in DeKalb County on local leadership. And I'm a big believer that the people you elect to county commissions and city councils and mayors and those offices are hugely important to your quality of life. They have a big impact on your tax bill. They have a big impact on the competence of the services that you receive for the taxes you pay. And I don't get to have a say in who the CEO of DeKalb is. I don't really get to have a say in who the county commissioners are, who the sheriff is, because those decisions are made in a Democratic primary. And so what this will do is allow for people like me to have a say in county government. And look, the pushback on me is, well, why don't you do that in Republican counties and other parts of the state? And I say to you, I'm fine with that. I think we need to take partisanship out of government that is very close to the people. You can run and say that you are a conservative or you are a liberal, that you're for more services or for lower taxes. That's enough. I don't know that these decisions, as far as who the best candidates are, need to be made in a primary, which is a much smaller electorate. I think we're much better off to have the general election electorate, which is much bigger, much broader perspective, make those decisions. I think we'll get better leadership. So I understand the Democrats' perspective on this because they were singled out. I get it. As a DeKalb Republican, I appreciate this change because I think it gives me a voice. And I think the handful of DeKalb Republicans, there aren't many of us. I mean, Biden got, 84, 85%. Stacey Abrams got about 83, 84% in the county. So it's overwhelmingly Democratic. But I think that DeKalb Republicans can be a moderating influence and perhaps give somebody who's a technocrat, somebody who's just a good government type, a better chance of getting into office in DeKalb County. So that's my perspective. I understand the Democrat pushback. I get it. And I'm fine with making it apply to everybody.
Well, just to really make sure our listeners understand, this is House Bill 369. And you just heard B-Rob say that he's fine with it happening in every county. But that's not what this bill says.
That's right. That's right.
This bill deliberately goes after 5 counties. And it also, Lisa, is a carryover. You know, we always talk about this on the show, things that don't get done in the last legislative session that comes back. This is sort of a carryover posture and language that the Republicans were unsuccessful doing last session. And what the district attorneys are saying, particularly the District Attorneys Association of Georgia, is saying that these 5 counties are run by Black women district attorneys, right? And so we all know that the beef between Senate Republicans and Fonnie Willis, but you had Democratic District Attorney Sherry Boston in DeKalb County come out right away. So Lisa, while in good faith, B. Rob is saying, hey, I want to be able to make sure everyone can vote and I want to have a voice, this is not what the Republicans were attempting to do. They were trying to dilute the significance of these 5 counties, which are Democratic strongholds, and deliberately go after these particularly Democratic district attorneys. And so I want to make sure that we keep it real. And so this is something that I think the governor's legacy is going to be looked at. When I tell you, Lisa, this is probably getting more pushback and more organization in the grassroots community than a lot of other bills to veto. You're seeing leaders all across the state come out against it. So again, if the Republicans wanted to truly have a nonpartisan platform, then they could have made it a statewide bill. But instead, this bill goes after the 5 Democratic stronghold counties. And Democrats, we better wake up and push back on this bill as much as we can.
And you agree with that, right, Brian?
I'm not going to say that I'm for vetoing the bill. No, I'm not going to do that, Lisa. I do think Kemp,
but he does agree that it's a deliberate attack on. And this is the thing, Lisa. At a time where public safety, Republicans are trying to act like they care about affordability, all these different things, right? They were laser-like focused on getting this bill done, and I think it's up to the governor to decide what he's going to do on this.
One thing I do want to point out, because I mentioned county commissions specifically, the bill does not apply to county commissions, so those would continue to be partisan elections. And I would like to go further and change that too. I want to be able to have a voice in that election in DeKalb County. And I think Democrats who live in an overwhelmingly Republican county might have a similar argument as me, that they deserve to have a voice in who the candidates are and who serves in those important local positions. Because it doesn't really matter on the local level whether you are super MAGA or anti-MAGA. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you're competent, that you try to keep taxes as low as possible and try to keep services as good as possible, and have a vision for economic development in your community. Those are things that you need. And those things aren't necessarily driven by partisanship. So I would just like to see less partisanship, because we're just so polarized now that I think we kind of need a pendulum swing away from some of that.
But real quick, Lisa, this is going to face a legal challenge. We have a lot of lawyers that listen to this podcast.
That's right.
And so the governor was asked literally about a little less than a week ago, as we're taping this, the session ended. He was asked about this. He said he hasn't really, quote unquote, taken a look at it. B-Rob, no, that's a good response from a governor at this time. Well, he may have not taken a look at it, but trust me, Lisa, he's looking at it. He's heard about it. But this is going to be caught up in court, and you're going to see attorneys from all across Georgia to really try to litigate the constitutionality of this bill.
Yeah, I didn't anticipate us spending this much time on this bill, but it is interesting, right? I think that these raise some great questions that are broader than just these 5 counties, and worth discussing. And I think Tharon's given us a good preview of what's to come. That of all the things out there, this is something that Democrats can rally behind and raise their voices on. I don't know if it's an issue where, when voters are so focused on affordability and economic issues, and now even, the war in Iran and that's impact on affordability, I don't know that this is going to be top of voters' concerns, but it is the kind of thing that can piss off the voter base for the Democrats in Metro Atlanta and maybe get them mobilized in some way. Something that Republicans need to keep an eye on.
Go back, Tharon, to your comments about a lot of chatter about Rick Jackson. Do you think legislators were more focused on elections to come as opposed to the business of the day?
Yeah, I mean, look, Rick Jackson changed the game. I mean, it was the best kept political secret we've ever seen in Georgia. But keep me honest here, B-Rob, I think there were a couple bills that sort of got a little life. One was that they wanted Rick Jackson to, quote unquote, disclose his state contracts. The second one, B-Rob, help me here. I think there was one that was sort of a language in there that would kind of prevent him from running.
Yes.
And so it was clear, Lisa, that there was some people, particularly on the Senate side, that wanted to sort of push back on this evolution of Rick Jackson and how he's just really not just emerged on the scene, has just burst on the scene with ads and getting around the state. And so there were a lot of people at the state, when you asked folks at the Capitol, do you know Rick Jackson? And a lot of people, be fair, Lisa, had good things to say about him. I remember when he talked to the foster care kids. I remember when he came to my health conference. Now, they also say that he gave him a lot of money, which Rick Jackson doesn't hide from, right? I mean, he's been bankrolling
he
a lot of
has
these
it, right.
campaigns. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people were waiting until after the session to engage in this race because it would have been not politically savvy to take a side in this governor's race while you were at the session.
Yeah, that's right. And Tharon's right. The bill that Burt Jones and his Senate colleagues were pushing would have kept Rick Jackson from running, in theory. And of course, I don't think it would have been in effect for this year, even if they had tried to make it that. I don't think that would have stood up in court. I don't think that would have been signed by Governor Kemp, but it certainly was something top of mind for Lieutenant Governor Jones, something he put a lot of pressure on the House to pass. The House stood firm in not doing that, which would be essentially taking sides in the governor's race and putting their finger on the scale there, and they had no appetite for that. And I think this week, and again, I need to disclose here, as always, that I am a consultant to the Rick Jackson campaign, so involved there. But I think you're beginning to already see some of the leverage having disappeared and now House members feeling free to endorse Rick Jackson. You're seeing names come out every day now. On Tuesday, we saw Insurance Commissioner John King, the first statewide official to weigh in on behalf of Rick Jackson. I think you're going to see some more House members over the next few days. Already we've seen Jacqueline Ford from deep South Georgia. We've seen Bethany Ballard from Perry, and we've got several others from North Georgia and Metro Atlanta coming out soon. So you are beginning to see those floodgates open. I don't want to set expectations too high. I think some people were like, all of the House is going to endorse Rick Jackson en masse, and that's not the case. I don't think anybody is saying that, at least not on the Rick Jackson team, but it will be a good number. It will be strong support. And I think the acrimony coming out of the session last week, where there was so much anger between the houses, will probably fuel some of the support for Rick Jackson on the House side.
Wow, interesting. Before we get out of here, do you think there's a potential for a special session? There was a lot of leftovers. Do you think it'll go in that direction soon?
Definitely. As we were down there Thursday night and we were looking at the bills that were passing and the bills that were not passing, it was two things, Lisa, that was very clear. One, data centers went to the House to die. I mean, I've never seen a group of bills that leave the Senate chambers and it kind of die. But then the one thing that we were all waiting on was the Republicans and Democrats, particularly Republicans, going to do something about voting, particularly dealing with the QR codes. We have until July 1st in this state to deal with this issue around voting. And so it was an unsuccessful attempt by some Democrats and a lot of Republicans to come up with a compromise bill that passed both chambers to deal with some of the issues that I think we're legally obligated to solve by July 1st. And so, Lisa, it was immediately chatter about lawsuits, which I think did happen. Correct me if I'm wrong there, B-Rob, soon as the session ended. And so now the governor and the speaker have sort of hinted that we may have to come back, we being the legislature, for a special session to deal with the voting logistics, the legal parameters that they got to deal with by July 1st. And so I think that voting, if we're not able to reach some kind of compromise because the session is out now, that may be the basis of a special session.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Totally. And I do think that the election issue is one that they're going to have to address in some way or have some workaround. Maybe Kemp has some magic up his sleeve that he can pull. But the Democrats have also raised an issue. There was a property tax relief bill passed. It was a subject of much negotiation, not what the House wanted at the end of the day, a watered down version that was passed by the Senate. But Scott Holcomb, a Democrat from DeKalb County, has said that the bill is unconstitutional because a bill like that must originate in the House, and that was a Senate bill. So I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I trust that Kemp's legal team will take a strong look at that. I don't think they want the headache of a lawsuit. Maybe he could veto it just to not have to deal with it. But at the end of the day, the House could come back, House and Senate could come back and deal with that in a special session. I don't know if that'll be a top priority, but I think with affordability remaining as voters' top concern, it would be a really smart idea to come back and make sure that that gets done and that they have that item to run on in November. Look, November is going to be tough, man. It's going to be a lot of the data shows strong tailwinds for Democrats and headwinds for Republicans. And there are a lot of districts, particularly in the state house, that are within the margin of error as far as partisan splits. And many of those districts are getting more diverse by the day, which, presumably benefits Democrats, particularly in a pro-Democrat environment. So Republicans need every messaging win that they can get this year. And I know that Speaker Burns is laser focused on making sure that happens.
All right. Special session could take place as early as May or as late as June. So we'll just have to wait and see. Thanks, guys, for checking in, as always, for another edition of Political Breakfast here on WABE.